Good evening, Carl, from Recording Studio Oxford. Ooh, the heat here has actually gotten quite warm. This room of mine turns into an oven over the day. Anyway, today I'm going to be reading the story of the Enchanted Canary. Once upon a time, in the reign of King Cambrinus, there lived at Avesnes one of his lords, who was the finest man, by which I mean the fattest, in the whole country of Flanders. He ate 4 meals a day, slept 12 hours out of the 24, and the only thing he ever did was to shoot at small birds with his bow and his arrow. Still, with all the practice, he shot very badly, because he was so fat and heavy, and as he grew daily fatter, he was at last obliged to give up walking, and he was dragged about in a wheelchair, and people made fun of him and gave him the name of Lord Tubby. The only trouble was that Lord Tubby had was his son, whom he loved very much, although they were not in the least alike, for the young prince was as thin as a cuckoo. And what vexed him more than all was that though the young ladies throughout the land did their best to make the prince fall in love with them, he would have nothing to say to any of them, and told his father he did not wish to marry. Instead of chatting with them in the dusk, he wandered about the woods, whispering to the moon. No wonder the young ladies thought him very odd, but they liked him all the better for that, and as he had received at birth his name of Desire, they all called him D'amour Desire. What is the matter with you? His father often told him. You have everything you can possibly wish for. A good bed, good food, and tons full of beer. The only thing you can want in order to become as fat as a pig is a wife that you can bring you broad, rich lands. So marry, and you will be perfectly happy. I ask nothing better than to marry, replied Desire, but never seen a woman that pleases me. All the girls here are pink and white, and I'm tired to death of their eternal lily and roses. There must be somewhere in the world women who are not neither pink nor white, and I will tell you once and for all that I'll never marry until I found one exactly to my taste. Now, sometime afterwards, it happened that the prior of Abbey Saint Amand. Well, apparently the flight scores are up again, and the Abbey of Saint Amand sent to the Lord of Esnes a basket of oranges with a beautifully written letter saying that these golden fruit, then unknown in Flanders, come straight from a land where the sun always shone. That evening Tubby and his son ate the golden apples at supper, and thought them delicious. The next morning, as the day dawned, Desire went down to the stable and saddled his pretty white horse. Then he went, all dressed for the journey, to the bedside of Tubby, and found him smoking his first pipe. Father, he said gravely, I've come to bid you farewell. Last night I dreamed that I was walking in a wood where the trees were covered with golden apples, and I gathered one of them and opened them up, and there came out a lovely princess with a golden skin. This is the wife I want, and I am going to look for her. The Lord of Avesnes was so much astonished he let his pipe fall to the ground. Then he became so diverted at the notion of his son marrying a woman shut up inside an orange, that he burst into a fit of laughter. Desire wanted to bid him goodbye until he was quiet again, but as his father went on laughing and showed no sign of stopping, the young man took his hand and kissed it tenderly, and opened the door, and in the twinkling of an eye was at the bottom of the staircase. He tapped lightly on his horse, and was a mile from home before Tubby had ceased laughing. A yellow wife! He must be mad, fit for a small waistcoat, cried the good man when he was able to speak. Here, quick, bring him back to me. The servants mounted their horses and rode after the prince, but as they did not know which road he had taken, they went all ways except the right one, and instead of bringing him back, they returned themselves when it grew dark, and their horses were worn out and covered with dust. When Desire thought they could no longer catch him, he put his horse into a walk, like a prudent man who knows he has far to go. He travelled in this way for many weeks, passing villages, towns, mountains, valleys, and plains, but always pushing south, where every day the sun seemed hotter and more brilliant. At last, one day at sunset, Desire felt the sun so warm that he thought he must now be near the place of his dream. He was that moment close to the corner of the wood where stood a little hut, before the door of which his horse stopped of its own accord. A man with a white beard was sitting on the doorstep enjoying the fresh air. The prince got down from his horse and asked leave to rest. Come in, my young friend, said the old man. My house is not large, but is big enough to hold a stranger. The traveller entered, and this host put before him a simple meal. When his hunger was satisfied, the old man said to him, If I do not mistake, you have come far. May I ask where you're from? I will tell you, said Desire. The most likely you will laugh at me. I dreamed that in the land of the sun there was a wood full of orange trees, and in one of the oranges I should have a beautiful princess who is to be my wife, and it is she whom I am seeking. Why should I laugh? Asked the old man. Madness in youth is true wisdom. Go, young man, follow your dream. If you do not find the happiness you seek, at any rate you will have the happiness of seeking it. Very wise. 1 second, Carl. I'm just going to bring down the shutters because the sun is burning me alive here. Oh, was one of the things is what I did not miss about Singapore. The next day the prince arose early and took leave of his host. "The wood you saw in your dream is not far from here," said the old man. "It is in the depth of the forest, and this road will lead you there. You will come to a vast park surrounded by high walls. In the middle of this park is a castle where dwells a horrible witch who allows no living being to enter the doors. Behind the castle is the orange grove. Follow the wall until you come to a heavy iron gate. Don't try to press it open, but oil the hinges with this." And the old man gave him a small bottle. "The gate will open of itself," he continued, "and a huge dog which guards the castle will come to you with its mouth wide open. But just throw him this oat cake. Next you will see a baking woman leaning over her heated oven. Give her this brush. And lastly you will find a well on your left, and do not forget to take the cord of the bucket and spread it in the sun. When you have done this, do not enter the castle, but go round it and enter the orange grove. There gather 3 oranges, and get back into the gate as fast as you can. Once out of the gate, leave the forest by the opposite side. Now attend to this. Whatever happens, do not open your oranges till you reach the bank of a river or a fountain. Out of each of the oranges will come a princess, and you can choose which one you like to be your wife. Your choice once made, be very careful never to deceive your bride for an instant. Remember, the danger which is most to be feared is never the danger we are most afraid of." Desire thanked his host warmly and took the road he pointed out. In less than an hour he had arrived at the wall, which was very high indeed, Carl. He sprang to the ground, fastened his horse to a tree, and soon found the iron gate. Then he took out his bottle and oiled the hinges. When the gate opened of itself, he saw the old castle standing inside. The prince had entered boldly into the courtyard. Suddenly he heard fierce howls, and a dog as tall as a donkey, with eyes like billiard balls, came towards him, showing his teeth, which were like the prongs of a fork. Desire flung him the oat cake, which the great dog instantly snapped up, and the young prince passed quietly on. A few yards further on he saw a huge oven with a white, red-hot, gaping mouth. A woman as tall as a giant was leaning over the oven. Desire gave her the brush, which she took in silence. Then he went on to the well, drew up the cord, which was half rotten and stretched out in the sun. Lastly, he went round the castle and plunged into the orange grove. There he gathered the 3 most beautiful oranges he could find, and tried to turn back to the gate. But just at this moment the sun was dark and the earth trembled, and Desire heard a voice saying, "Baker, baker," take him by his feet, throw him in the oven. "No," replied the baker. "A long time has passed since I first began to scour this oven with my own flesh. You never cared to give me a brush, but he has given me one, so he shall go apiece." "Oh rope," cried the voice again. "Twine yourself round his neck and strangle him." "No," replied the rope. "You have left me for many years in the past to fall to pieces with the damp. He stretched me out in the sun. Let him go in peace." "Dog, my good dog," cried the voice, more and more angry. "Jump at his throat and eat him up." "No," replied the dog. "Though I've served you long, you never gave me any bread. He's given me as much as I want. Let him go in peace." Iron gate," cried the voice, growling like thunder. "Fall on him and grind him to powder." "No," replied the gate. "It is 100 years since you left me to rust, and he has oiled me. Let him go in peace." So once outside, the young adventurer put the oranges into a bag that hung from his saddle, mounted his horse, and rode quickly into the forest. Now as he was longing to see the princesses, he was very anxious to come to a river or a fountain, but though he rode for hours, a river or fountain was nowhere to be seen. Still his heart was light, for he felt that he had got through the most difficult part of his task, and the rest was easy. About midday he reached a sandy plain, scorching in the sun. He was seized by a dreadful thirst. He took his gourd and raised it to his lips. But the gourd was empty. In the excitement of his joy he had forgotten to fill it. He rode on, struggling with his sufferings, but at last could bear it no longer. He let himself slide to the earth and sat down by his horse, his throat burning, his chest yawning, and his head going round. At last he felt death was near him, when his eyes fell on the bag when the oranges peeped out. Poor Desire, who had braved so many dangers to win the lady of his dreams, would have given at this moment all the princesses of the world, whether pink or golden, for a single drop of water. "Ah," he says to himself, "if only these oranges were real fruit, fruit as refreshing as what I ate in Flanders, and after all, who knows?" This idea put some life into him. He had the strength to lift himself up and put his hand to his back. He drew out an orange and opened with his knife. Out of it flew the prettiest little female canary that was ever seen. "Give me something to drink. I'm dying of thirst," said the golden bird. "Wait a minute," replied Desire, so much astonished that he forgot his own sufferings, and to satisfy the bird he took a second orange, opened it without thinking he was doing. Out of it flew another canary, and she began to cry, "I'm dying of thirst. Give me something to drink." Then Tubby's son saw his folly, and while the 2 canaries flew away, he sank to the ground, where, exhausted by his last effort, he lay unconscious. When he came to himself, he had a pleasant feeling of freshness about him. It was night, and the sky was sparkling with stars, and the earth was covered with heavy dew. The traveller, having recovered, mounted his horse, and at the first streak of dawn he saw a stream dancing in front of him, and he stooped down and drank his fill. He hardly had the courage to own his last orange. Then he remembered the night before he had disobeyed the orders of the old man. Perhaps his terrible thirst was a trick of the cunning witch, and suppose, even though he had opened the orange on the banks of the stream, that he did not find it the princess he sought. He took his knife and cut it open, and out of it flew a little canary, just like the others, who cried, "I am thirsty, give me something to drink." Great was the disappointment of Desire. However, he was determined not to let this bird fly away, so he took some water in the palm of his hand and held it to its beak. And scarcely had the canary drunk when she became a beautiful girl, tall and straight as a poplar tree, with black eyes and golden skin. Desire had never seen anyone half so lovely, and he stood gazing at her in delight. Well, on her side she seemed quite bewildered, but she looked out with happy eyes and was all afraid of her deliverer. He asked her name. She answered she was the Princess Zizi. She was about 16 years old, and for 10 years of that time the witch had shut up an orange in the shape of a canary. "Well then, my charming Zizi," said the young prince, who was longing to marry her, "let us ride quickly so as to escape from the wicked witch." But Zizi wished to know where he meant to take her. "To my father's castle," he said. He mounted his horse and took her in front of him, and holding her carefully in his arms, they began their journey. There you see our Prince Desire and the Princess Zizi, Carl. Everything the princess saw was new to her, and passing through mountains, valleys, and towns, she asked 1,000 questions. Desire was charmed to answer them. It was delightful to teach those one loves. Once she inquired what the girls in his country were like. "They are pink and white," he replied, "and their eyes are blue." "Do you like blue eyes?" said the princess, but Desire thought it was a good opportunity to find out what was her heart, and did not answer. "And no doubt," went on the princess, "one of them is your intended bride." So he was still he was silent, and Zizi drew herself up proudly. "No," he said at last, "none of the girls in my country are as beautiful in my eyes, and that is why I came to look for a wife in the land of the sun. Was I wrong, my lovely Zizi?" And this time it was Zizi's turn to be silent. Talking this way, they drew near to the castle. When they were about 4 stones throw away from the gate, they dismounted in the forest, by the edge of a fountain. "My dear Zizi," said Tubby's son, "we cannot present ourselves before my father like 2 common people who have come from a walk. We must enter the castle with ceremony. Wait for me here, and in an hour I will return with carriages and horses fit for a princess." "Don't be long," replied Zizi, and she watched him go with wistful eyes. When she was left by herself, the poor girl began to feel afraid. She was alone for the first time in her life, and in the middle of a thick forest. Suddenly she heard a noise among the trees. Fearing lest it should be a wolf, she hid herself in the hollow trunk of a willow tree which hung over the fountain. It was big enough to hold all together, but she peeped out, and her pretty head was reflecting the clear water. There appeared not a wolf, but a creature was quite as wicked and quite as ugly. Let us see who this creature was. Not far from the fountain there lived a family of bricklayers. Now 15 years before this time, their father had, walking through the forest, had found a little girl who had been deserted by goblins. He carried her home to his wife, and the good woman was sorry for her and brought her up with her own sons. And as she grew older, the little goblin became much more remarkable for her strength and her cunning than her sense of beauty. As she was always being teased, she got as noisy and cross as a titmouse, so they used to call her Titty. Titty was often sent by the bricklayer to fetch water from the fountain, and as she was very proud and lazy, the goblin disliked this very much. It was she who had frightened Zizi by approaching her with a pitcher on her shoulder. Just as she was stooping to fill it, she saw reflected in the water the lovely image of the princess. "What a pretty face!" she exclaimed. "Why, it must be mine. How in the world can they call me ugly? I'm certainly much too pretty to be their water carrier." So saying, she broke her pitcher and went on. "Where's your pitcher?" said the bricklayer. "Well, what do you expect? The pitcher may go many times to the well, but at last it is broken. Well, here's a bucket that will not break." The goblin returned to the fountain again, and once more the image of Zizi said, "No, I don't wish to be a beast of burden any longer." So he flung the a bucket so high in the air it struck the branches of an oak. "I met a wolf," she told the bricklayer, "and it broke that bucket across his nose." The bricklayer asked no more questions, but took down a broom and gave her such a beating that her pride was humbled a little. Then he handed an old copper milk can and said, "If you don't bring it back full, your bones shall suffer for it." Titi went off rubbing her sides, but this time she did not dare disobey, and a very bad temper stamped down over the well. It was not at all easy to fill the milk can, which was large and round, and would not go down the well easily, and the goblin had to try again and again. At last her arms grew so tired that when she did manage to get the can properly under the water, she had no strength to pull it up, and it rolled to the bottom. On seeing the can disappear, she made such a miserable face that Zizi, who had been watching all this time, burst into fits of laughter. Titty turned round and perceived the mistake she had made, and she felt so angry that she made a mind to revenge at once. "What are you doing there, you lovely creature?" she said to Zizi. "I am waiting for my lover, and then with a simplicity quite natural in a girl that so lately had been a canary, she told the whole story. The goblin had often seen the prince pass by with a gun on his shoulder when he was going after crows. She was too ugly and ragged for him to have noticed her, but Titi undecided admired him, and she thought she thought he might well have been a little fatter. Dear, dear, she said to herself, so he likes yellow women. Why, I'm yellow too, and if only could think of a way. It was not long before she did think of it. What? Cried the sly Titi. They are coming with great pomp to fetch you, and you're not afraid to show yourself to many fine lords and ladies with your hair down like that? Get down at once, my poor child, and let me dress your hair for you. The innocent Zizi came down at once and stood by Titi. The goblin began to comb her long brown locks, when suddenly drew a pin from her strays, and just as the titmouse digs its beak into the head of linnets and larks, Titi dug the pin into the head of Zizi. No sooner did Zizi feel the prick of the pin than she became a bird again, and, spreading her wings, she flew away. That was neatly done, said the goblin. The prince will be clever if he finds his bride. And arranging a dress, she seated herself with a glass to await desire. Oh, this is not good. Meanwhile, the prince was coming as fast as horse could carry him. He was so impatient that he was always fully 50 yards of lords and ladies sent by Tubby to bring back Zizi. At the sight of the hideous goblin, he was struck dumb with surprise and horror. Ah me, said Titi, so you don't know your poor Zizi? Well, you away, the wicked witch came, and she turned me into this. But only when you have the courage to marry me, I'll get back my beauty, and began to cry bitterly. Now the good-natured Desire was as soft-hearted as he was brave. Poor girl, he thought to himself, is not her fault. After all, that she's grown so ugly as mine. Oh, why did not follow the old man's advice? Why did he leave her alone? And besides, it depends on me to break the spell, and love her too much to let her mate like this. So he presented to the goblin to the lords and ladies of the court, explaining the terrible misfortune that had befallen his beautiful bride. And they all but pretended to believe it, and the ladies put false princess the rich dresses they had brought for Zizi. It was perched on the top of a magnificent almond palfrey and set forth the castle. But unluckily, the rich dress and the jewels only made Titi look uglier still, and Desire could not help feeling hot and uncomfortable in his entry to the city. Bells were pealing, chimes ringing, the people filled the streets, standing on the wall to watch the procession go by, and they could not hardly believe their eyes when they saw what a strange bride their prince had chosen. In order to do him more honour, Tubby came to meet at the foot of the great marble staircase. At the sight of the hideous creature, he almost fell backwards. What? He cried. Is that the wonderful beauty? Yes, father, she said, Desire with a sheepish look, but since she's been witched by a wicked sorceress, she will not gain in beauty until she is my wife. Does she say so? Well, if you believe that, you may drink cold water and think it bacon, the unhappy Tubby answered crossly. But at the same time he adored his son, and he gave the goblin his hand and led into the great hall where the bridal feast was spread. The feast was excellent, but Desire hardly touched anything. However, to make it up, the other guests ate greedily, and as for Tubby, nothing ever took away his appetite. When the moment arrived to serve the roast goose, there was a pause, but Tubby took the opportunity to lay down his knife and fork for him. But as the goose gave no sign of appearing, he sent off his head carver to find out what was the matter in the kitchen. Now this is what happened. While the goose was turning on the spit, a beautiful canary hopped onto the sill of the golden window. Good morning, my fine cook, she said in a silvery voice to the man watching the roast. Good morning, lovely golden bird, replied the chief of the scullions, who'd been well brought up. I pray heaven may send you to sleep, said the golden bird, that the goose may burn, and so there may not left for Titi. The instant the chief of the scullions fell fast asleep, and the goose was burnt to a cinder. When he awoke, he was horrified and gave orders to pluck another goose, to stuff it with chestnuts and put it on the spit. While it was browning in the fire, Tubby had inquired for his goose a second time. The master cook himself mounted to the wall to make his excuses and to beg for his lord to have a little patience. Tubby showed his patience by abusing his son. As if it wasn't enough, he grumbled between his teeth that the boy should pick up a hag without a penny, but the goose must go on burn now. It isn't the wife who's brought me, it is Famine herself. While the master cook was upstairs, the golden bird came again to perch on the willow skin and called out in her clear voice to the cared scullion who was watching the spit. Good morning, my fine scullion. Good morning, my lovely golden bird, replied the scullion, whom the master cook had forgotten in his excitement to warn. I pray heaven, went the canary, that it will send you to sleep, that the goose may burn, so there may be none left for Titi. And the scullion fell fast asleep. When the master cook came back, he found the goose as black as the chimney. In a fury, he woke the scullion, and in order to save himself, told the whole story. That accursed bird, said the cook, it will end up getting me sent away. Come, some of you, and hide yourself. Whenever it comes again, catch it and wring its neck. He spitted a third goose, and it lit a huge fire and seated himself beside it. The bird appeared a third time and said, Good morning, my fine cook. Good morning, my lovely golden bird, replied the cook, as if nothing had happened. And at the moment the canary was beginning, I pray heaven may send, the scullion was enough, rushed out and shut the shutters. The bird flew into the kitchen. Then all the cooks and scullions sprang after it, knocking at it with their aprons. At length one of them caught it just at the very moment Tubby entered the kitchen waving his sceptre, come to see himself why the goose never made his appearance. Then the scullion stopped at once as he was just about to wring the canary's neck. Will somebody be kind enough to tell me what's the meaning of all this? Cried the Lord of Avesnes. Your Excellency is this bird, replies the scullion, and placed it in his hand. Nonsense, what a lovely bird, said Tubby, and stroking his head he touched the pin that was sticking in his feather. He pulled it out, and lo! Pop! The canary at once became a beautiful girl with golden skin who jumped lightly to the ground. Gracious, what a pretty girl, said Tubby. Father, it is she, it is Zizi, exclaimed Desire, who entered that moment. And he took in his arms, crying, My darling Zizi, how happy I am to see you once more. Well, and the other one? The other one was quietly stealing out the door. Stop her, called Tubby, we will judge our cause at once. And he seated himself solemnly on the oven and condemned Titty to be burned alive, after which the lords and cooks formed those in lines, and Tubby betrothed Zizi to Desire. The marriage took place a few days later. All the boys in the countryside were there, and armed with wooden swords and decorated their epaulettes made of gilt paper. And Zizi obtained Titty's pardon, however, and she was sent back to the brick fields, followed and hooted by the little boys. And this is why today the country boys always throw stones at a titmouse. On the evening of the wedding day, all the larders, cellars, cupboards, and tables of the people, the rich and poor, were loaded as if by enchantment with bread, wine, beer, cakes, and tarts, roast larks, and even geese, so that Tubby could not complain any more that his son had married Famine. And since that time there has always been plenty to eat in that country, and since that time too, you see in the midst of fair, blue-eyed women of Flanders a few beautiful girls, whose eyes are as black and whose skins are the colour of gold. They are the descendants of Zizi. Well, I know a little about that, Carl, and I think you do too. Often think... Well, love you to bits, Carl. Before I collapse in this heat, I will close this one, and we'll talk next. We'll talk again tomorrow. Bye.